Welcome to State of Identity. I'm your host, Cameron D'Ambrosi. Joining me this week is Alexander McCaig, co-founder and CEO at Tartle, empowering and protecting the digital identity. Alex, welcome to State of Identity. So excited to have you here.
Cameron, thanks, man. Nice job reading me in. That sounded really nice. I feel extra professional now.
So, we've had a good amount of folks, on the podcast who I've spoken with who are doing really exciting stuff in this space of allowing consumers to kind of take more direct control of their personal identity and their personal data online. In a nutshell, would you mind laying your elevator pitch on us in terms of, what Tartle is, what you guys have built, and why you think it's so important?
Yeah, no problem. I'll keep this super simple, and everybody seems to take this pretty well. So last year, the 2018 profits for Facebook were a little bit over $15 billion. Now, 98% of those profits accounted for targeted ads. Those targeted ads are sustained by individuals' information. So they were selling off people's data within their platform so that they could reap, their own profit for it. My contention was that value needs to go back in the hands of the individual. That asymmetry, right, where it's only going to one side and no one else is collecting on that for the greater majority, that imbalance needs to be fixed. And that's where Tartle came into play. It's how do we channel that value that these larger firms are taking with the information that we create day in and day out, and channel that value back to the individual so that they can use that for other goods and services so that they can benefit themselves on a larger scale. Does that work for an elevator pitch?
Yeah, that's fantastic. And, I guess at a more granular level, how you're achieving that with the use of blockchain and encryption, I take it, so that, if someone is trying to access someone's data that they don't have permission to access, the consumer has not given them the key to decrypt it, essentially?
Yeah, great. So let's skip the elevator pitch and let's jump into the technicalities of it, right? So the system, right, and this is going to sound like a mouthful, is a peer-to-peer, anonymous, self-data brokerage, okay? Peer-to-peer, anonymous, self-data brokerage. What does that mean? What that means is we've created a system where individuals can come together with the power of blockchain on an open public ledger, right, to transact their data as anonymously as they choose to another party in a one-time shot, or they can allow people to subscribe to those streams of data. And it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's photos, prescription information, health histories, political ideology. It doesn't matter what you want and what you want to sell. Everything has a value to it. And the ability to do that is set up through the power of blockchain on the system and the power of cryptocurrency. So we had to have an idea of coherency throughout the system. Right? So how do you open up global data market and make sure that people can get paid in a system that works across borders? Well, lucky for us, cryptocurrencies came into play, specifically Bitcoin, because that's the one that's most proven since 2009. We're like, that is the most perfect partner for a data market itself, because now you have the ability to buy and sell data across borders without the worry of governments or internet restrictions or any of those issues, right? So when we employ blockchain, it allows us to keep heavy amounts of encryption on the system. You do not let that information go until you want to, and it's always in some sort of language that is completely scrambled, so the other parties, if they even tried to steal it, would just be getting nonsense information that wouldn't be worth their time. They would be disincentivized to even try and hack or steal that info. So their best option is actually going to pay those people for that information that they actually want to collect.
That's fantastic. And, I guess taking a step back into a bit more of the why as opposed to the how, data privacy has kind of been growing in importance to consumers over the past year, with all of these breaches and things like the election really kind of bringing this concept of folks having lost control of their personal data to top of mind. It's obvious that you guys have spent some time putting this together. What was your, personal impetus for founding Tartle and putting this platform together?
I'm glad you asked. So the whole, life's about a hell of a lot of luck, right? And it was a function of our timing. So I was sitting in a restaurant with my co-founder, and we're looking around, and it'd be nice in our time if people could actually have a solid conversation with one another, in the means of some sort of social atmosphere. But people tend to go to their phones. So we're watching them, and we realize we're like, it's kind of funny, and we both have backgrounds in finance. We're like, is all this information these people are creating? I was like, is there a value, a personal value that these people can reap from? And we're sitting around. This was quite a few years ago, before this whole thing kind of came into play beyond Cambridge Analytica and Facebook using information, and everybody reaping a huge profit, right? So we're sitting there like, is there something possible with this, right? Because we thought it was important that if we could create a market that people are comfortable with transacting their information, right, then you have an infinitesimal base of what can be created and the amount of wealth that can be generated from it, because we create knowledge and identity and information all day long, every single day. So it's like this, it's like the most unlimited resource. It's almost like the new oil, right? So we're sitting there and we're looking at it. It's like, okay, so if people can transact their own information, well, what else would be able to do with that? Well, that opens up a lot of possibilities, right? Because now if we have a new asset class, which is data, people are calling it science, that means you can do quite special things with it. You can move into other sorts of financial products, like underwriting people on it, right? Offering certain types of insurance. The world begins to change because now you are trading not just in fiat currency financial products, right? But now you're in something that's completely intangible, and this intangible has a lot of value to it in our current society. So our why was like, well, how is it that we generate value for 65% of the financially underserved market across the globe? All these people have cell phones, but they really don't have means to access, some sort of value for themselves. But realize that they have social media, they're online, having access to that internet, and they create data every single day. So how do we use those things in combination to create a system of opportunity for those, 3 to 4 billion people across the globe? How do we do something like that so we have it palpable, but have it match and align with the intentions and how we interact with human beings and make sure that it has the right moral and ethical values in place so that the system doesn't do harm, but it does a greater amount of good. So from these ideas, from that why trying to help the greater good, the larger underserved, we found ourselves at a point socially where everyone's like, oh, my privacy, I'm worried about my data being taken, it's being sold, these big companies are using it. We just happen to be there at the point, with a different outlook of trying to solve a 65% of the globe not having financial access problem to, okay, now we're helping people control their information in that format. We're helping them get value from it in a world that was riddled with asymmetry. And now beyond that, we are opening up the realm of privacy with financial sovereignty at the same time. And we think that is a huge win. And that's beyond what people have as, I'm just going to collect, cache browser information and other things like your cookies, and then companies will kind of sell that. No, it's beyond that. We're talking about true source information, the real value of what makes us individuals, your true digital identity, the real digital twin of you, because it encompasses your choice, your emotion, your behaviors, the true pieces of your life that have been difficult to define or frankly impossible to define with what people typically collect online from secondary and tertiary format. So by going to the source, keeping it more morally, ethically sound, offering these layers of encryption, the privacy, and allowing people to derive some sort of financial value for themselves, we created Tartle.
And, I think one of the biggest challenges as I see it in gaining kind of broader adoption of these technologies is, I suppose, disrupting the big incumbent data brokers, but also convincing consumers to participate in that they actually do have an alternative to, having their personal data be commoditized in so many words. From your perspective, do you see the bigger business development challenge as getting the institutions and organizations that have been purchasing data previously through data brokerages to consider a more P2P marketplace, or convincing consumers, to adjust their personal habits and, take the trouble of setting up a Tartle profile so that they can begin monetizing?
Cameron, that's a great question, but it's a function of both, right? It's not just one or the other. And let me explain how that works. So from the data brokerage standpoint, that's the one you asked first. So if companies are going out and spending just like massive amounts of capital, right, to purchase this information and have it analyzed so that they can come up with some sort of a decision, they're getting secondary and tertiary information. They can't get actual direct information, very personal information on the individual, because there's legal ramifications for that. They don't have the ability to actually get that sort of access because this information is collected in a format that was not in direct conversation with the people that were actually creating it. So getting them to adopt the system of Tartle is not telling them that they have to go from a revenue-based model of their business to a profit-sharing one, but that they can still maintain a revenue-based model of their business, but the habits of how they purchase their information and aggregate it would be in a more ethical, moral format, and an albeit quite a discount to what they were currently purchasing to get that information directly from the source that people are actually creating it. So what does that mean? What that says is that it's not difficult for them to adopt Tartle because there's no barrier to entry for anyone, whether it's on a buyer side or a seller side, to jump into the system. It's a function of now educating all of these firms that are in the habit of collecting and hoarding and buying secondary and tertiary data, and telling them that there's a greater option with an ease of availability of access to get to, and at a much greater discount than what they were currently purchasing. Oh, by the way, all the information comes in a pre-formatted, ready-to-analyze file so that they don't have to go through the laborious efforts and applying all this machine learning and hiring all these people with PhDs to get a very simple understanding to their business problems, right? That's the data broker side. Now, on the individual side, how do we get these people to come in? Because remember, this is a marketplace, so you have to fill both sides of volume. It's a function of trust, right? So, and that trust comes through proper incentives. So, okay, we're going to offer someone who wants to protect their information and control it the availability to do so. Okay, so you can store your information in the system. We'll encrypt it for you, and you have the choice to let it go or delete it, or edit it in any function you want whenever you choose to do so. Okay, so you've given them all the choice. That's the first thing. And now you're giving them tools like a VPN system and the ability to have a digital wallet, blockchain, right? Now you're giving them other pieces of opportunity, right? So, okay, now they got this a little bit of a pie. They're starting to understand. You pay them all their prices. And now beyond that, you educate them through the platform on a three-stool prong. So it's function, vision, and theory. So if they can understand those three aspects, this tool now becomes something that they've been educated so well on that they can take it and now go build their house with it, right? You can't just hand somebody a hammer and expect them to know how to build a house or frame something or do whatever with it. You have to teach them how to use that tool. So bringing people on board is getting that trust, showing them what's available, but educating them on the possibilities of what can be done with it, so that when someone goes around and the conversations used to be like, Grandma, do you know what Facebook is? Well, that will change now to where people are so well-versed, they'll be like, Grandma, do you know what Tartle is? And that's the point we need to drive to, and that will drive that side of the market, right? The people that are creating that data. That'll cause them to adopt it on their own time when it becomes layman terms, and people can just share it through word of mouth and that own reputation, so that I don't have to stand around and tout this thing all day long. People begin to understand it in their own nomenclature, and that's the most important part. So as we begin to fill both sides, they have to happen coherently and at the same time, because this is a data marketplace. Does that make sense?
From a consumer perspective, we really have started to see that worm turning in terms of folks really wanting to take personal ownership and more, responsibility, which is a word that I hesitate to use because I think it does shift almost blame onto the consumer. That makes it sound like people have been reckless in some ways with their personal data, when I think the better word is not reckless, but they've been trusting. And I think in many ways that trust has been misplaced. But I think the scales have been pulled from folks' eyes in many ways. And that we're entering a new phase of this conversation where people are realizing like, okay, I do need to actually think about these and have kind of a personal data posture, if you will, and a strategy. And I think Tartle is an excellent example of the tools that are empowering people to make that shift. Pivoting, I guess, to the economic side of things, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on what you and your team kind of expect the economic impact of this platform to be. In mulling this over myself, I could almost see a couple different ways this going. One, I could see this, increasing the value of this personal data that is being sold relative to the data available from data brokers, because of the fact that it is consensually gathered, and the fact that because it's gathered at the true source, which is the consumer themselves, and they have consented to it, the value of that's going to be inherently higher, because you can believe what you're collecting, and that makes it that much more valuable. On the other hand, by opening up these markets and truly making them transparent and actually two-sided, maybe it's going to drive the price of data down, in the sense that it's an open market with more transparency, and that data brokers may in many ways have been kind of taking advantage of the opacity of these markets and getting a higher price than the market will actually bear for these things. Do you have any data or thoughts on which way you kind of expect the economic impact of Tartle to have on the data marketplace as a whole?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Now, Cameron and our listeners, I would ask them to think holistically here. Okay, you're asking is, will one increase and one decrease? Well, actually, both are going to happen at the same time. Like a function of everything that happens in the universe, it tries to find equilibrium, like balance within our bodies, right? When you go work out, you sweat, and that sweat brings your temperature back down so you can cool and get back to that original state, right? So if we're looking at data, the value on one side for people is going to increase significantly. But for the select few of the data brokers, that's going to drop off, right? That will find its normalization. It will find its equilibrium. And you can track that on the system, and you'll be able to see that. But the point is, for a total picture, right, when you're trying to find balance, one's going to go up and one is going to go down until they find themselves in the golden middle. So in terms of economic impact beyond that, economic philosophy of how that is going to happen, let's look at something else that's happening. If we consider, if we consider data markets as a whole, right, and data is the thing that drives our decisions, from an economic impact, if you have people now receiving information directly from the source, and that's the most important thing, right? People don't like drinking their water from something they don't know where the hell it came from, right? You like seeing water bottle, like, okay, I know what source it came from. Okay, well, your data should be the same exact way. You want to be a hypocrite. But if you're getting your information from the source, what that means is you no longer have an excuse to make poor decisions, right? And so how do we expand upon that? If I no longer, as a corporation, right, as a business, right, an entity, say I'm a manufacturer, I no longer have the ability to make a poor decision. Okay, so what does that mean? I'm not going to send over to my factory in China and tell them, okay, because we're unsure about what the demand is for the market, okay, we're going to order 20,000 blue tables, 50,000 blue chairs, and we're also going to order, 1,000 Toyotas in tie-dye. What you're doing is, because we're all trying to guess on demand, because we have no true idea of what demand is, and this is a problem with economics and marketing, is that we have to guess into the best of our guess, pre-plan on our materials and our services, what we want to purchase in our supply chain and our logistics, and do whatever we can to keep our costs at a minimum while still trying to get a grasp on what people truly want and not manufacture too much at the same time, okay? But the thing is, when you over-manufacture, create things that people don't need because you haven't directly asked them for that information or figured out what it was from the source, that has a large environmental, ecological, social, political, and financial impact on the globe that is non-beneficial to what's trying to happen. So in terms of a win-win scenario, that's not a win-win. That's a zero-sum game. But when you use Tartle and use source information, it becomes a win-win, because now you are only operating at just the right amount of asset turnover and inventory and specific raw materials that you exactly need to create something in a system for people that are actually asking for it in a specific format. Now there's no waste in the system. So as you begin to cut out that waste, right, in a holistic standpoint, the entire environment of the financial system, right, and our actual geological and animalistic environment, right, that we have, our troposphere that we live in, those things begin to heal at the same time, because we're not, asking too much of the earth, or straining our resources, or creating what doesn't need to be there, having more ships go across the ocean, stocking more shelves in Walmart with stuff that we don't truly need. Now we're only taking exactly what we need. So it's not a minimalistic approach, but it's a true approach that gets rid of the fat, gets rid of all the issues that cause us to financially overspend and overburden ourselves on a global scale. And now when we come and we ask people for source information on what we should do, you're going right there, and instead of having just a global idea of what people want, you have a singular idea of what people want, but the application of it becomes global, which is something we've never had the ability to do before. And the only way to do that is to understand what true demand is. And the only way to understand true demand is to ask the people. And there's only one place you can go and do that, and So in terms of an economic impact that you're asking, as the adoption of this begins to increase, all the different fields that are required to have information that create, buy, or sell goods and services, or whether or not you're in politics, the amount of payback and value created that does true good, right? Existentially true good for all these people, right? Physically and non-physically, would be almost incalculable. And that's the beauty of it, and that's the vision of what we are trying to create into the future. So I hope that answers what you were asking in terms of how do we see the economic impact of what's happening and where is it headed in the future.
So I guess to that end, for consumers who are listening to this and for folks in the industry who are listening to this, want to get involved in the Tartle ecosystem, whether through signing up themselves or entering into the marketplace as a buyer of data, how do they do that? How do they do that? What's the onboarding process like, and how do they get started?
No, I'm glad you asked. So we want to keep it as simple as possible. Right? Like I said, we want to have absolutely no barrier to entry. So, Cameron, if you want to be someone that wants to sell your information, you go to tartle.co, Tartle.co. There's a giant button on there. Okay, you probably have to be legally blind to miss it, but there's a big button. You click on Join Now. In about 10 seconds, you'll have your account verified. You're inside, and you can start populating those data packets so that people can start bidding on it, and you can get paid for your info. That's if you're a seller. Okay, that's a 15-second process for you. If you're a buyer, we have another just as big button on the webpage for buyers to sign up. And they click on that, and within another 15 seconds, they can be on there and they can begin to search for the information that they want to purchase. They can track the pricing. They can see the market moving. They can suggest material or other data packets that they want to buy or put into the market so that sellers can fill out so that they can begin to recoup that information, right? You got to make sure that it's organic on both sides. So for them, it's another 15-second process for them to get inside and start looking at the data they want to purchase, right, and start making those moves. And if there's any question or difficulty in doing so, we have FAQ pages, we have YouTube video walkthroughs, we have everything you need in all those resources to kind of move yourself through it. Right? So that's the simplest way to get people on board.
Fantastic. And as someone who's a Scotsman myself, I can't help but ask, is the name of the company Tartle related to the Scottish phrase for when you stumble recollecting someone's name?
Yes, that's correct. So why can you, I'm going to take a gander here because this is interesting. Why do you think I chose that?
For myself, it seemed like kind of an obvious pun almost on the fact that the platform necessarily creates that ability to have your name forgotten via encryption.
That's exactly it. You're on it. So I'm taking two anonymous parties, bringing them together in an introduction, but we have no names, so we have no idea what it is. So you have that brief pause, but beyond that, there's a transaction that happens. So if there's any possible word choice I could ever choose, it would have to be a Tartle. And the best part about it is that it doesn't mistranslate anywhere across the globe. It only means one thing in one specific place, so it can't get misconstrued. So I thought it was just
amazing. Well, as someone named Cameron, makes me even more excited about using the platform. Alexander, thank you so much for your time. This is really, really insightful conversation. Really excited to see where this goes next. Again, would you mind plugging your website one more time for folks who are interested in joining the ecosystem and want to know where to go?
Yeah, no problem, folks. Please go to tartle.co, Tartle.co, and you'll find your large buttons on there for signing up and all the other materials.
Before you go, got to ask you the signature state of identity question, which is to take out your crystal ball, make some predictions for the future of digital identity in 2019 and beyond. What do you got?
I'm glad you asked. So this is how I see it happening. We've had a rather combative approach in our society for this whole data world. My contention is those things will go away. It will no longer be competitive in the future. It will become a system of sharing where people can mutually benefit on both sides. So that's what I see with data changing in the future. There will be a higher respect for what we create and how it is accessed. And then beyond that, it'll become a system of shared value rather than just those asymmetries that we earlier talked about.
Fantastic. Thank you again for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Fantastic predictions. I hope those come true, and I wish you and your team the greatest of success, because I really, from a personal perspective, believe in what you guys are doing, your mission, and really empowering consumers to take back their data. So hope to talk to you again soon, and thank you again.
Thank you, Cameron.